Let's bring in MS Now congressional reporter Michael Schnell, MS Now contributor and chief White House correspondent at the New York Times, Peter Baker, and Aaron David Miller, senior fellow at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. It's good to see all of you guys this morning. So, Aaron, I'll start with you. The U.S. and Iran have been trading these strikes now again for days. We're seeing this continued escalation. What sign, what signal does the president's post from this morning send to you?
I think confusion and the fact the president's in a box. Look, the MOU is designed to achieve two purposes, much like the Gaza deal in October 2025, end the war, number one, and open the straits. It was a short-term fix, kicking all the other issues down the road. The problem, Antonio, is that these two objectives, ending the war and opening the straits, are fundamentally irreconcilable. The Iranians have weaponized geography. They do not intend to give up their leverage and control. They want to turn the straits into an ATM machine. In addition to being able, it's their new nuclear weapon. And the administration is now caught in a bind. Either they escalate in an effort to change Iran's calculations, 40 days of war didn't do that, or they begin to acquiesce in what is a very uncomfortable and unfavorable reality, that the straits that we knew, February 27, 28, choose your cliche, horses left the barn, genie's out of the bottle. They're not going back to the way they were. This is the problem with the war of choice that has now pushed the administration into very unpalatable options.
Michael, give me the view from Capitol Hill, and particularly from your Republican sources here, as they look at what's happening overseas and understand that continuing escalation means continuing domestic instability here at home.
Yeah, Antonio, I've been talking to Republican members of Congress for the recent days about the president saying the ceasefire is over, and the consensus has been 3 points. First off, members saying they're not surprised that the ceasefire is over. Some folks even questioning, was there ever a ceasefire in place at all? They sort of expected it to end up here, given the kind of actor that Iran is, and given the fact that our two countries were still hostile towards each other in that time. Secondly, they said that they want President Trump to finish this war because they think that given the place where we are now and how invested we are and how far into this we are, they don't want to let Iran off the hook. They want to finish the job. But the third matter that came into play, Antonia, was the fact that this is not going to reflect well on Republicans. With fighting continuing, there is going to be inflated gas prices. As you mentioned, they're already up. Republicans control all levers of power right now, the House, the Senate, and the White House, which means that increasing those gas prices is going to negatively reflect on Republicans. And members are very clear-eyed that that could impact them come November. I spoke to one House Republican who said those gas signs that have the prices on them are 2 feet long and they are raised in the air and everybody can see it. There's no way to ignore it. And they're worried that this is going to impact them negatively come the midterms. But, and it's an important but, they believe that the ends will justify the means given the fact that Iran needs to be defeated.
Well, Peter, I guess I want your reaction to some of what Michael just laid out there. Is the president and his inner circle aware of the position they have put the rest of the Republican Party in here? Because even if they have their own individual views about what would be best to do about Iran, the reality is voters have made their feelings about this entire situation very, very clear. And really, finish the job is not acceptable to them. So all-out war, once again, not acceptable to voters. But also just living with elevated gas prices and kind of a constant hum of escalation back and forth and flip-flopping isn't going over so well either.
Yeah, I mean, it's important to remember this is the first war in the history of polling in the United States that the public was against from the very start. OK, they never supported this war, and in part because the president never told them why they were going to war in the first place. He made very little effort to prepare the public, to rally support, to explain to voters what was at stake here, what his goals were, what the cost might be, what it might look like, any of that stuff. And so literally from day one, the American public was against this war, and that's been a problem hanging over the Republicans ever since. The president said it would be just 4 to 6 weeks. We're now 5 months almost since it began. And it doesn't seem to be likely to end in any time soon. Now, it's not going to be the full-scale bombardment and so forth that we saw early on. It seems like we're kind of in this middle stage where we don't have any kind of peace deal, but we don't actually have the full-scale war either, which is kind of an unsatisfying place to be, but it may be the only place that the president can find himself at this point. There's not going to be a clear-cut deal anytime soon. It doesn't look like. This memorandum of understanding that he called the beginning of the first peace in the Middle East in 3,000 years only lasted a couple of weeks. It's a memorandum of misunderstanding, and this was the easy part. We hadn't even gotten to the hard part. So this is going to keep going now for quite a while. And to Michael's point, we're only a month or so, maybe 2 months away from the beginning of early voting when people are getting out there. And people's minds are already pretty much set on this. So the Republicans are not happy about this at all.
Aaron, there's also this exclusive Wall Street Journal reporting that the Israelis informed the United States that Iranian leaders were hatching a fresh plot to kill President Trump. We know already that this is something that a sort of form of revenge that they have been thinking about for a while. That reporting goes back months and months. But I'm curious what your read is, A, of this allegation that the Iranians would be seeking to assassinate Trump in the midst of this messy MOU, and also of the timing. Some experts have sort of said that they think it might be questionable, that they think Israel has motivations to sort of turn Trump further and further against the Iranians and mess up the negotiations and keep mediators from being able to get the job done. How do you read what this means and what this represents for any hope of peace?
I mean, you'd want to confirm through American intelligence, but I don't doubt that the Israeli reports are probably accurate. In 2024, you had a credible intelligence community assess they had a credible and serious effort by Iranians to create circumstances to kill the president. And then you had an actual criminal case, which had been unsealed with an IRGC operative who was in the planning stages of trying to do that. Look, it elevates this whole thing to the personal and the existential, right? I mean, the Israelis and or the Americans on February 28th killed Ali Khamenei. And the Iranians, all of the signage in and around and the propaganda in and around the funeral of Ali Khamenei, it seems to present a threat against President. I don't think the Iranians have the capacity to do it, but they still haven't repaid their debt for Trump's killing of Qasem Soleimani in January of 2020. So I think it's real, but it's not going to change the overall dynamic of this conflict. A war of choice is now producing what I'm afraid is going to be a flawed sort of peace of necessity. And that necessity is not going to redound to the advantage and the national interest of the United States.
Can I ask you a quick follow-up, Aaron, about Rahm Emanuel and his recent remarks in Tel Aviv? I'm sure you've seen. I was struck by one part of his remarks where he's talking about that saying that when all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. He said, quote, Israel will become a prisoner of its own tools. Your military is a hammer, such that to the prime minister, Netanyahu, every security challenge is a nail. What do you think Rahm's speech in Tel Aviv tells us about the state of U.S. and Israeli relations and what comes next?
You know, I worked in administrations, Jimmy Carter to Bush 43, and I'd throw in Obama and Biden as well. I've never seen the foundational supports of this relationship under greater threat and under greater stress. Common and shared values is being undermined, a high coincidence of interests, certainly on Iran, on the Palestinian issue, and then the adhesive that has bound the U.S.-Israeli relationship together for decades. That adhesive is bipartisanship, and that is cracking now. You have at least 3 different Democratic views on Israel and at least 2 Republican views. So the old axiom that being good on Israel leads to success in American politics, that can no longer be taken for granted, to say the least.
Peter, I want to return back home and talk about this housing bill debacle for a minute. So the president is not going to sign this bipartisan housing affordability bill. He's also not vetoing it, which means at midnight it will still go into effect unless something changes. Walk me through how this is going to play out, you think, in the midterms. It seems like part of the problem here is even if it goes into law later tonight, the Republicans missed out on their chance to have their photo op, their ceremony, the story told to the voters about what they got done.
Yeah, it's kind of an own goal and it's kind of hard to understand, right? He's trying to use this, or at least he was trying to use this as leverage to get the Senate to pass a bill on voting restrictions that the Senate can't pass and is unrelated to the housing bill. And so because they can't pass it, he is protesting by not signing it. I guess that's the logic. But you're right. As a matter of politics, how this helps him is not really clear because the Republicans wanted to run on this fall. They wanted to say, we're concerned about affordability. Remember, just the other day, the president said affordability is just a made up word. Well, okay, he made $2 billion last year. His disclosure forms just showed us, but a lot of Americans didn't. And affordability is a big issue this fall. And this is taking one of the tools that the Republicans were hoping to use in the campaign away from them. It's going to be a lot harder for them to say, hey, we made things better if the president himself refused to sign the legislation they would like to brag about. And the Democrats now have an obvious talking point. Why he handed that to them is really unclear. And it raises a lot of questions among a lot of Republicans who keep asking the question about whether the president even wants to win the midterms or whether he's, either intentionally or unintentionally seeming to sabotage his own party.